Good morning, everyone. We've got a couple people, Janelle, Steve, good morning. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is the language around getting a price reduction, how to have some of those conversations. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. Good morning, Zav. I see you're here. Thank you for being here. All right, today's class is working with sellers on price reductions and key negotiation strategies. So I'm going to weave in some key things with regards to negotiation that might help, because really you are having a negotiation with your seller to try to influence them to get their home priced in alignment with the current market so you can get it sold. All right, so today's topics, let's go over what we're going to talk about. How to increase your confidence at the negotiation table, how to negotiate and work with sellers on a price reduction, how to get your sellers to accept a lower offer. We're also going to get some tips from a FBI hostage negotiator, and I'm going to recommend a book to you guys somewhere in this presentation. And how to be influential when you're meeting people, and then also key negotiation strategies for different personality styles. Because you can't come to a conversation the same way with all of your clients, because everyone's different. People are different, and you really need to meet them where they are in order to help them make a decision that's best for them. Okay. So I pulled up some stats that I wanted to go through really quickly with you guys. This came from Altos Research. I actually got it from the Stephen Thomas presentation that he did. But overall price reductions across the United States are up 35%. Los Angeles County price reduction stats 31%. Orange County 35%. Riverside County 41%. So 41% of the listed homes have price reductions. In San Diego County, 37%. So, and our expected days on market have increased as well. So in March, we had 24 days on the market. Today, 77. Seems a little high to me, but those were the stats that they were giving. So as we go into the fourth quarter of this year, it really is going to be likely that if you take a listing, that you may need to do a price adjustment, and you may need to help the sellers to understand where they need to be. Does anybody have a listing right now? Kind of raise your hand and unmute yourself, that you're struggling with getting showings, etc. Or unmute yourself too. I can only see a few people on the screen. Okay. All right, so let's keep going here. So we know, and I've got some great stories of this. They weren't great in the moment, but the stress of buying and selling can really send the nicest people over the edge, right? People that are usually really calm can get really riled up during a time where it becomes tense. They're not getting the money out of their home that they originally thought. So things can be very, very stressful. But the right words and the right approach can really allow you to sell and be a little bit more convincing by being very strategic in your conversations. So that's what I really want to focus on today, is not going into a conversation without a strategy. Is what are the steps? What are the things I need to do to put together a strategy to have a conversation with a seller? And this really goes for a buyer as well. Okay, that we have to have kind of a strategy going into it to be persuasive. So your job as a real estate professional is really to help them overcome their fear and hesitation. And this goes for buyers too, because there is fear and hesitation out there to really achieve the goal that they've set. Now, where else does this play out? So it could play out in the form of negotiating repairs. And I want to hear from you guys, whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, what's going on right now in the market when it comes to negotiating repairs? Give me a sense of a transaction you've recently been through. How was the seller in giving any credits back or doing the repairs? What are the buyers thinking? Unmute yourself and tell me what you're seeing.
Well, during the seller's market, sellers didn't want to pay for repairs. They didn't think they needed to. It was a buy it and take it strategy. Now
Right.
that the market is softening, now they have to consider paying for repairs.
Right. And didn't it feel like that almost changed on a dime? Thank you, Jeff. Didn't feel like it changed within a 2-week period?
Very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's really important to know that the buyers, well, we're seeing a lot of properties fall out of escrow, and that is something that we have to be aware of, and we want to do our best. And that's why these key negotiation strategies are so important. It's because we need to hold these transactions together.
It's amazing what a little interest rate will do.
I know. And now we're seeing like interest rates have come down a little bit from the high, and inventory is kind of slowing down. So we'll see what's going to happen. But yeah, it's amazing the effect that the interest rates had almost immediately. And so we're going to see that the buyers are going to ask for more repairs. They're going to ask for credits. They may ask for an interest rate buy down by the seller, right? They've got a lot more negotiating power and they know it. Okay, so that's important to know. And I feel like sellers are fairly educated today, and some maybe even a little scared, so they're giving in on some of those repairs and things like that. I think it just depends on the people, but so you have more power to persuade them than you think you do, but you have to go about it in a strategic way. Okay, so to move them forward, you need to be mindful of every word and action that you take and meet them where they are. So what does that mean to you guys? What does it mean when I say you need to meet them where they are?
I think just providing good, strong data to your seller that helps them understand the market that they're in. They don't realize that it changed on a dime 2 weeks ago. They think it's still going strong and that they can get what they want. They've heard the news, they hear about interest rates, but they don't really understand what that means to them selling right now today. So I think just having data to provide them about the market is very helpful.
And setting those expectations. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that the more you can educate your clients, the more they will be willing to take your advice and see your point of view in terms of what you're advising and follow your lead. Because really, most people want to have they want to follow. They want to be guided. And if they feel like they're given all the information, they're much more willing to do that. So
I found that people don't want to be told what to do. They want to be given information and they want to decide what to do.
Right. They want to feel like they're still in control of the situation, right? Yeah. And they don't want to be told, but they do want to be guided. They want to be, like all of us, we may go to a financial planner, we may go to an accountant, and they may guide us in making some decisions that are right for us. But in general, people do like to be guided, and part of giving them the data is super important. There's a really good book. I don't know if you guys have read this one. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator, and it's a really great book, and he really gears it towards business and negotiating in business. And he uses the tools and techniques that they use to talk down these whoever they're trying to negotiate with, these hostages, people that are holding people hostage. It's a fascinating read. Even if you guys like to listen to books, I listened to this one while I was exercising and doing things like that. It's a good one to listen to also. Highly recommend it. So the bottom line is you need to not worry about being nice and not wanting to come to telling them bad news, etc. But instead, I want you to think about going to your next appointment, whether it's a buyer or a seller, by being strategic and business minded. Okay. Okay. So let's talk through how to get a price reduction. All right. And before we do that, I want to shift your mindset here a little bit. Let's say the average home price is $1 million. Okay. And let's say the average commission is probably more like 5%, but I'm going to use 6% as my example here. 6% of $1 million is $60,000. Divided in half, splitting that with the other agent is $30,000. So what if you went to a listing appointment and that client, once they agreed to use you as their real estate professional, had to sign over a check? Instead of you getting commission after the end of the transaction, they literally wrote you out a check for $30,000. What would they expect from you? Okay, throw it at me. They just wrote you a check. They just paid you $30,000 to represent them. Like, that is a total mind shift, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Top service, good advice, professionalism, ethics,
Access.
Access to you. Yep.
Good communication.
Good communication. Yes, 100%.
And to do what you were hired to do, to do your best that you were hired to do.
your house will sell in a day.
Yeah, exactly. Just like that.
Right. And do what you're hired to do. Do what you said you were going to do. Right. So yeah, that's
Meet
a whole
the
different
expectations you set.
Yeah, right. So yes, I agree. They expect you to know your market. They expect you to educate them on the process, set expectations for them, kind of reduce some of those fears. And like Jeff, you said earlier, really they're remembering that the house 2 doors down had 15 offers and, sold at $100,000 over asking. That's what they have in their head.
And that might have been true 6 weeks ago. They saw the house 2 doors down sell 6 weeks ago, and they think that their house is going to sell the same way today because they don't understand.
Right. And what happens if you don't address that and you get the listing and you go ahead and market it in the first weekend? They've had 3 people come through an open house and no offers. Right. That looks bad on you.
And then comes 30 days and you say, gee, I think we ought to lower your price. And now you're really looking pretty poor.
Yes.
You didn't set expectations to begin with, and you didn't help them understand the market they were facing.
Right.
And now all of a sudden they think you're the dirtball because you can't get a house to sell.
Right. Or maybe that you misled them or whatever. So it really comes back on you, even though, you're doing your job to market the house and all of that and advising them, but it does come back on you. So setting expectations not only helps the people that you're taught, your clients, and understand the market and all of that, but it really helps you in looking like a professional and setting up the expectation that it's the market that is that has changed, and the market is telling us this, not you, right? Not pointing the finger at you.
And I think it's important to show with the change in interest rates, maybe a visual of what a mortgage payment looked like at a lower interest rate and what it looks like today. So they can see why there's less buyers, because if your payment is now $1,000 more at that same price, then they can understand better why they're not seeing all the people lining up.
Because yes, and that's a super good point, because they're seeing it from their perspective as a seller. They're not really putting themselves in the shoes of the buyer. Like what actually, because everyone's kind of involved in their own lives and they've got their own jobs and worlds. They're not paying attention to real estate and interest rates and the effect of those on a daily basis like we are. They're not seeing it, right? It's sort of this thing on the, that's out there with some information, but it is, I think that's a really good point to show them what the effect of this, the increased interest rates are having and why buyers have pulled back, why people have just decided they're not going to buy for a while, and that overall has decreased demand. So super important to get them to see how these changes that the Fed is making is affecting us down the line. They also expect to have flawless marketing and representation, and you setting out a marketing plan and explaining that out to them. And that you're professional, dress for success, etc. All right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you score yourself on the ability to get a price reduction? Okay. Now, if you think that, if you ever go into that situation, think, oh, I really just don't even want to have this conversation, right? It's usually not something that we enjoy doing too much, because sometimes we're anticipating a lot of pushback, right? So let's give an example of like a home that you've had listed. It's been on the market for about 30 days and you got one offer early on and they rejected it. Does this sound familiar to anyone? And then got nothing since. All right, and now you're preparing to talk to them about a price adjustment. Hopefully you've set some expectations ahead of time that you would reevaluate it after the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But what's your strategy going to be? What's your strategy going to be in persuading them to do a price adjustment so they can get an offer, get their home sold, and move on to meeting the goals that they've set for themselves?
I think part of it is minimizing the chance that you'd even need to do this in the first place by having that serious conversation about price to begin with. If you set that realistic price to begin with, again, 2, 3, 6 weeks ago, they could have shot for the stars, every new listing, jack it up tens of thousands of dollars, and they would get their price. Today, you have to have that conversation and let them know and help them set that price realistically. And then you're probably going to have minimal chance of having to come back and say, gee, we got to drop our price. But,
yes.
But your point is, we're there now, we're 30 days. How do you get them to do it? It's again to have that same conversation about what is happening in the marketplace and why, if they continue at the price they are and it stays on the market as it has been, it just hurts them in the end, because properties that stay on longer and longer and longer.
Right, absolutely. So having a strategic conversation with them ahead of time so that you can avoid this all to begin with. Now, and tell me what you guys are witnessing out there in the market. I'm hearing and seeing that a lot of my coaching clients actually have thought that they've priced it just right to the market, and they're getting crickets. They're not getting anybody through, and they think that they are competitive and in line with the other homes that are listed around their home.
You gave the statistics from Stephen Thomas that 35% for Orange County had to lower their price, but there's still 65% that didn't lower their price.
Right.
What was the key difference between those two groups of homes was probably setting the price realistically to begin with.
It could be. And yes, so that's a really good point.
I mean, it could have to do with, lots of factors of specific zip codes or condition of property, or, I mean, you can go on and on, but in general, those statistics are probably related to the beginning price that was set to begin with.
Right. So it could be the beginning price that was set to begin with. It could be that there, maybe that those homes were in kind of a subpar location, right? Maybe they backed or, it could be a number of different things. It could be that the condition wasn't great, and that the homes that are selling in that 65% range are ones that are in great condition, great location. They're gonna sell, very saleable. It could be a number of things, but to Jeff's point, the ability to set the price correct from the get-go is really important. But we all experienced sellers who just, really hold their line on the price that they want, and we'll just wait and see. And I think that brings up another point, which is, are you gauging the motivation of the seller before you take on let's say it's a big listing that you're going to spend a lot of money on?
That's a great point, Karen.
Yeah.
You have to determine whether they're a serious seller or just feeling out the market.
Right.
If they don't need to sell the house today, well, how serious are you? Why are you putting it on the market? If you need to sell the house, you want to sell the house, you're determined to sell the house, then we have a ball game. But if you're kind of just waiting it out, testing the water, you're really wasting your realtor's time.
And guys, be careful with this. I know realtors who spent upwards of $10,000. Now we're talking, on marketing, higher end homes, $3-4 million homes, and taking those listings when the seller didn't have a ton of motivation. But that agent got super excited. I got this listing, with the hope that that person will be motivated down the road. And you get yourself in a lot of trouble. And I know several people that invested a lot of money in marketing and all of that, and eventually that seller took the home off the market, and that's a killer, right?
I think one of the important points too is that when you talk to your sellers and they insist on a higher price than you feel comfortable with, that you follow up with either email, a text, or however you're communicating in writing. So when you do have that price reduction, you say, remember, we had that conversation and I suggested this. However, we were going to try this for a couple of weeks. Now you have your backup, because sometimes they forget that conversation.
Right. Exactly. And that's really smart. And to do it as kind of a backing up or summarizing your conversation in an email type of thing, I think is super smart.
And documenting is always a good thing to do. So having that in a written format is good.
Right. Yep. Nope. All really good.
I don't know if from my limited view, though, I see lots of sellers who are selling because they know it's at the top of the market and they believe it's time to get out. So there are a lot of them who are motivated because they want to get out at the top instead of, waiting and seeing the property decrease. I've helped a number of people with rentals lately, and, rental properties have been extremely competitive.
Yep.
And what we're faced with is that you have sellers who come in with all cash now because they got equity in the bank since they sold their house. They now are renters. They need to compete just like everybody else, except they come in and say, I'll pay the entire year up front. Knocks everybody else out of the water because they've got cash to do it.
Right.
But that's where I see the sellers are selling right now because they believe we're at the top, and they're motivated, I believe, to sell because they think they're at the top. And
right. I think all of that is absolutely correct. And I think there are people out there, and they may be right, right now being, there's going to be some fluctuation in the market. Hopefully it won't be that much. But if somebody was planning on selling in the next year, maybe now is the right time, So
if they don't really need to, they're still going to be around for 5 years. You have to help them that this is just a little blip in the next 5 years.
Right.
They have to sell because they plan to sell, and well, then this is a good time to make that determination.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good input, you guys. So my advice is to be overly prepared for these conversations. And this, I think, has really helped me out a lot, is to set a goal for the meeting. Know what you want out of that meeting. So for example, you go in and you kind of have in your mind that you want a $25,000, $50,000 price reduction, because that would better align that property with the market. Right? So have in your mind what you want out of that meeting, because it will help you help them gain clarity as well. All right, so one of the tools we talked about earlier is in your arsenal is education. Educating your sellers really helps when it comes to negotiation. When you walk them through the process from beginning to end, they are going to be less fearful, more reasonable to work with. And it also has a way of calming people down when they understand the data, they understand what the market is telling us. And so some of the language you can use is, let's see how the market responds to this price that we're going to list at. And then we will reevaluate how the market is responding to that price after 2 weeks. Right? Because then it's not you saying, it's your opinion that we need to reduce it. It's how the market is responding. It kind of takes you out of the mix in terms of your own opinion. That makes sense.
I always think it's better to give a client the data to make the decision themselves. You obviously, the data is going to help determine the outcome that you believe they should be following, but it's up to them to make that decision, and you just need to give them the data to make the right decision.
Exactly, right, exactly. So we're not really saying that you need to bring in the accurate data and let them make the decision. And I always kind of think to myself, just the facts, give them the facts in a non-emotional way, because I know that some of us can come to an appointment really wanting to be that white, what is it, the white knight in shining armor, whatever it is, that coming in on the white horse to solve everybody's problems. But sometimes you can't, right? No matter how great a marketing you do, how many open houses, the price is not right. There's something that needs to be adjusted so that you're in more alignment with the market. So what data can you bring to persuade them to do a price adjustment? So throw it out here at me, guys.
Recent sales in the neighborhood, in the area, in the zip code, how long on the market, comparisons between recently sold, how does that look to yours?
Maybe anything that's closed since they've been on the market.
I always say to clients, highest prices come from competition. Pure and simple, competition drives price up. And are they going to get competition from listing it at the highest price possible? That's not going to achieve the highest price sale. The competition will. So if you price it appropriately, if it looks attractive, they will get potentially multiple offers. Even in a softening market, if it looks attractive, buyers will want that property.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll come from having competition, not from putting the highest list price on a property.
Right. That actually eliminates competition, right?
The higher you go, the more it looks like it's too high priced, the more people say, I'll pass and
move on to the next one.
Because some buyers don't think that they can reasonably negotiate right now. It is softening, but they don't realize how much negotiating power they may have today. So, will they come in and say, gee, I'm giving you so much less? Well, we'll see. If there's competition, they won't. If they are the only offer on the table, then the answer is yes. You're going to take whatever offer you're given, and you're going to have to go with it if you want to sell that property.
Right. Yep, absolutely. When you've only got one to work with. So I definitely think that you want to be accumulating data as you move along in a listing. So for sure, you want to give them the data on how many hits their listing has gotten online. Find ways to get that data, because what will happen, and I love that because it's very telling. Let's say you get 2,000 hits, 2,000 people view that listing, right? But only 2 or 3 actually came to view the property, right? So in their mind, they're not justifying the price enough to come see it, right? So that's part of it. Yes. Yeah, I thought somebody said something. Okay. So keep track of that. Keep track of your marketing activities and your the number of the exposure numbers. So discuss everything you've done to market their home. How
In a
many
softening market, your marketing is more important than ever. Because
Right.
if that property isn't attractive visually online and you're not getting appointments, it's because you didn't take the time to make the property look attractive so that people would want to make the appointment.
And you know,
And if
I've had
in a hot market, you could have put one picture and they would have been there because they wanted that. But in
right.
a softening market, it has to look good in order for people to want to take the time to see your listing versus any other listing.
So that's a really good point. Let's stop right there on that, because I want to pick up on that. I think we know photos are super important, right? Having professional photos done, super important. But what does anybody have a strategy that you guys use for photos?
Can this is Victoria.
Hey,
I've been
Victoria.
here listening, and you know, I've been through a few of these markets over the last 23 years. And I will tell you, one of the things that starts to be really important in this type of environment, when we start to see that the shift is happening, is everything you guys have said is just right on point of, you know, and especially gauging the interest of the seller, how serious they are before you start spending your money. That is really key. But honestly, just not even photos. Make sure that you're also taking photos and entering photos of the community, things that are going to be important to the buyer as to what they want to be there and why they want to be there. And I will say that this is probably when you start considering, it's like Jeff said, you know, in a hot market, you could literally take one photo, put it on the MLS, and it's going to sell. This is now where we enter into a skills environment
Right.
of who you are as an agent. And that's when you start bringing your experience and knowledge as to what's going to make this home more attractive than the other ones that they see that are sitting there too. And that's even going to be something like easily staging the property. Vacant homes are great in a hot market, but when it comes to selling it for more money and making sure it's attractive and people see themselves there, staging is key. And it does usually, it's been studied, it does net you more money. So those things that you really can bring to the table with your experience is going to be, what are you going to do above everybody else?
Right.
That means,
Right.
it means sometimes explaining to the seller, you know, this again, gauging how serious they are, is, do you want to sell the property or do you just want to sit on the market? And,
Right.
and these things all play factor into it.
Thank you for that, Victoria. That absolutely, you are spot on. And a couple of comments I want to make about that with regards to photos. I know that some agents will have a strategy that less is more when it comes to the photos. Do you want to show absolutely every single room in that home? Or do you want that viewer online to want more, to want to see more? You know, I think it goes different ways. I think you want to have the best photos in the, you know, in the library of photos that you have for that home, but maybe think of, is less is more appropriate for this listing? And do I want to maybe just highlight the great backyard they have with entertainment areas or whatever it is, and the kitchen and some of those, but leave some to the imagination where they want to see more? I know in some of the luxury markets, they do that to try to get more people to step forward and come in. I think staging, I totally agree with you, is super important. It really, really sets it apart. But I also want you to think of, and I didn't put this in here, and I should have, what are the proactive things that you're going to do to market their home? Because everybody knows that we do photography. So Victoria, to your point, what are you going to do differently? You know, what are the proactive things that you're going to do to drive exposure?
I think it's the avenues or distribution, not just photos. Photos are great. Photos are going to get disseminated to the major sites, but where else and how else are you going to get people to see those photos, that listing? So your marketing effort isn't all about just the photos, although the photos themselves are extremely important because what people see online determines how excited they are in a property.
Sure.
And I'm not a proponent. I don't know that I agree with your last about just give them a sneak peek, and if it whets their appetite, they'll be there. I say give them all the important views. I do think that you can overdo it by having every angle of a room, and that's the reality of what a Matterport tour is all about. Is if you want to see the relative angles of a room, you can spin around in a Matterport and you can walk yourself
Right.
all the way through. But the still photos are really about catching the major excitement of features of the
Absolutely.
property.
Yeah.
And but I think you should capture as much excitement about all parts of the property so that people, when people have enough information by seeing it online, they then have made a serious decision about why they want to see the property. And I think the ones that only take a couple pictures and expect there to be excitement are
That's the way
cheating
they-
themselves.
Right.
And the reason that they do that, which is another point to be made, is that in a softening market, convincing your seller that preparation is more important than ever to have an attractive property that's in good repair that makes theirs desirable over somebody else's is more important now because it is softening and they're going to make choices and you want them to make your choice, not somebody else's choice. And the reason that, going back to photos, that some agents in a seller's market is, well, they wanted to hide the details that you didn't want to see. And so they wouldn't take those photos. They would limit the photos. Well, that's great. But what happens when you get to that property and you're now so disappointed because you didn't get to see that ahead of time and know? You're like let down, and now you're like marching out of that property. And I say, well, give it to them. The truth is, what is this property you're representing, and represent it to the best you can. Reminds me of years ago. It's been quite a few. I think at or before the recession, I took buyers to see a property in Ladera Ranch. And from the pictures, it was a gorgeous house. They wanted to see it. I was excited to show it to them. And agents are, crafty people. We don't want to show what we don't want them to see. And when we drove up, what are they located right next to is an easement with high power lines going right by the property. It was totally cut out. You had no idea it was there. It wasn't in the description. And what do? You get all excited, but the minute you get out of the car, you go, oh.
And you're right. It's a non-starter, right?
So I say, disclosure and giving it to them, they're going to know soon enough. You might as well tell it to them.
Curious people in. Yeah. Okay. I gotcha. I see your point there for sure. And I think that, those are super good points. And the photos really do matter. And so let me finish up this page here. So track your marketing activities. Lay that out for them. So when you're trying to get a price reduction, lay out everything you've done. Have you done a broker preview? What kind of advertising, mailers, door knocking around the neighborhood, any special open houses, things like that show that you're proactive. You've done, X, Y, and Z to drive traffic to their home. And think about some of the other proactive things that you might do. In addition to that, is there any reverse prospecting going on?
I know one thing that I've done over the past, and it works tremendously well, is I get with the local schools for the area, and usually they will have their little, school newsletters. They will have, and I will tell you, in a down market, when you are just trying to get a property sold, you find every little avenue you can. And one thing that's always been very successful in my opinion, has been making sure you advertise the home in a school newsletter, because most people that want to live in an area want to be tied to certain schools. And so I usually the newsletters, they don't go, the kids don't bring them home and read them themselves. But I will tell you, as a parent, I could tell you most parents read those newsletters because they want to know what's going on with the school and what's going on for the week or the month. And those little tiny advertisements of putting a home in that market area is a key selling strategy.
That's a great point. I love that. And I love the fact that, it hits a target market. There may be people that, want to move into that community, and it gets your name out there, especially if it's in a farm or something like that. So that's a great proactive thing to do. I had another thought regarding what Victoria had said about the lifestyle, really showing, what else is in that community that would be important for a buyer to know, because people don't just buy homes. A lot of the time they buy communities, right? And so adding some photos and so forth to kind of highlight and spotlight the community is important too. Okay, so the data, we talked about going over what's sold, the current pending sales. I think pending sales really show that price point at which somebody is willing to make an offer, right? And any new active listings that have come up since they've been on the market, that's their competition. If you're really struggling to get people to do a price reduction, taking them out to see some of those active listings, to see what their competition looks like, sometimes is very helpful also. Bring sample marketing with you to show them what you've done, so that you bring that to the table and so forth. So let me give you some, I've got 7 key negotiation tips for you. Be extremely well prepared and rehearse the conversation you're going to have. Have every tool in your arsenal and be prepared. And I would even just practice it, right? Remind yourself, and this is really important, number 3, remind yourself who you are going to be negotiating with. What is their personality style? Anticipate some of the objections. Think through what objections are they going to give me? And how am I going to solve those? And what we talked about earlier, have a goal. Be clear on what you want the outcome to look like before you go in. Determine a strategy for your presentation. And then number 7, what can you include and pull into your presentation that can increase your persuasive power? So definitely include all of that. So remember, they could be under pressure, they could be stressed, and the more, the market does correct, they can be emotional. Therefore, you need to be that calm, cool head in the room that presents them with the facts. And if it does become more tense, they really do need you to be the cool, calm head and an advisor. So for those of you who are listening, if you know that you naturally talk fast, you should slow it down. You should practice slowing it down. Persuasion doesn't happen when you talk fast. In fact, subliminally, it makes them feel like you're anxious.
It repels.
It repels. So slow it down. If you're one of those people, stand your ground.
I have to consciously do that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something to definitely think about. Because you kind of lose credibility when they think that you might be anxious yourself in that conversation. So put the data out there, the facts, the numbers, right? Remember, just the facts, man. That's kind of what, you should just.
If you're over persuasive, it sounds like you don't have any bend in your negotiating, that it's all about you, that you're unbendable, and
you've broken
it repels. It repels.
And right, you've broken rapport at that point, right? If it repels, 100%.
That's why I say in the way that I think makes it effective is to stop selling your ideas and present your ideas and let them make their decision based on the data. If you sell them on something you think they should do and you're really pushing hard, they will push back hard.
Right. And if it's a buyer in situations where agents really push a buyer to make an offer or push a buyer to do something that they're not comfortable with, is when you really see them falling out of escrow because they're not comfortable with it. And they don't have all the data, there's something wrong. So how do you prepare for this? Script it out, extract your own emotion out of the conversation. That'll keep them calm. Present the facts and with power, and rehearse it. So true or false, if you are prepared to come, are you prepared? I don't think I wrote this in right. Are you prepared to come across a lot more confident? People are puzzles. And this goes to a point that I made earlier, that remind yourself who you're meeting with, right? Because everybody's different. And when you meet them where they're at, it is really important. And that's one of the things that's highlighted in that book, Never Split the Difference, is that you've got to meet these negotiators when they're negotiating with somebody who's got people held hostage, et cetera. This is a life and death situation, right? So you've got to tap into their emotions. You've got to tap into meeting them where they're at. So think about their personality styles. Do we as humans make emotional decisions?
Yes.
I used to say, no, I never do.
We all do.
Right. We all do. Right. And we justify those decisions with logic. Right. So we need to determine what emotional drivers the other party values. What is the reason they're moving? Are they moving to be closer to their kids and their grandkids? What emotional drivers are causing them to make a change? In the book, Never Split the Difference, that I mentioned earlier, Chris Voss, the author, says emotions are not an obstacle. They're a tool and a means to help you understand the needs of your counterpart. So so it's important to heighten your own emotional intelligence, because the interaction is similar to therapist and a patient, but you need to ask the probing questions. Ask them to go deeper, remind them. A lot of times it's good to remind them of why they were selling their home to begin with, or why they wanted to buy in this particular neighborhood to begin with. Okay. And work to open up and really listen and hear them, and always ask a lot of really open-ended questions. Okay. All right, so let me go back to this. So I want to talk to you about the personality styles that you might meet up with at the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to highlight a couple different ones, but one would be maybe that driver personality style. So who's the driver personality style? That's going to be people, leaders. They're influencers. They have some sort of influence. They're fast paced. They usually talk quicker, right? They tend to be more impatient. They're highly focused. And what I've found is that they can make decisions pretty quick. Like, give them the data, give them the facts, boom, boom, boom. Okay, this is what we're going to do. They can make a quick decision. They also don't want to be bogged down with a lot of data. You'll lose them, right? Give them the highlights, give them the information, but they don't need tons of charts and graphs and things like that, right? They want the top level information, enough in order for them to make a decision.
So Karen, you have an appointment for a listing presentation. How do you determine what type of an individual you're going to make a presentation to when you don't know who they are?
Yeah, when you don't know who they are, that's tough.
Or do you have some thought or technique for quickly determining who they are in your opening?
I do.
And then adjusting?
I do. That's actually something we're gonna cover here. So let me, was it this one? No.
I've always tried to, listen and know how to use this information, but when I go in to meet people I've never met before, I don't know how to be prepared because I don't know who they are, what their personality is,
Right.
or
They definitely tend to have stronger personalities.
you can determine the strong personality pretty quickly.
Right. If you have a sense of what they do for a living, that's always helpful. Typically, you'll have that pre-conversation ahead of time over the phone or whatever before you go into that listing appointment. Many times you won't know exactly what they do for a living or whatever, but maybe it's a referral from somebody. You get a sense of what they do for a living. If they own their own business or they're fairly high up in the company, they tend to be more of that driver personality. And so you have to look for clues when you get there if you just don't know. Look for clues in their rate of speech. If you see that you're presenting a lot of information and you're losing them, that's somebody who usually wants things to move pretty quickly. They're less emotional. They can be very gregarious and very people oriented, but definitely don't make as many emotional decisions. They're much more logical. They're pretty direct in general, and have that feeling that they like to be in control. Like sometimes that's a feeling you can get from them.
I think the opposite end of the spectrum is the more dangerous, because you are not determining their capability to make decisions. It might seem like they're meek or mild or less sophisticated or uneducated, and you make these assumptions, but they're the ones who are making their own decision, but you're losing them because you believe in your head that they need extra guidance or extra from you, or
they're not telling you exactly how they feel.
Yeah.
Like they're not coming across, they're not giving you those social clues.
I can deal better with that strong-headed person than I can the meek, mild, less
That may be because
vocal.
you may be more of a driver personality. And I think that's where it's great, because you can meet them where they're at, right? You kind of know you're similar to them, right? And you know what you want. Now, here's the problem. What if you get to an appointment with a highly analytical person, who the person you're kind of talking about, but maybe they're really analytical. Maybe they're an accountant, or they're a rocket scientist, or something like that, where somebody is CFO of a company, very analytical and by the numbers and all of that. You as a high D or a driver personality style may only come in with the top level information, the stuff you'd want to know, right? But meeting them where they're at means that they're going to need more data in order to make a decision. They may be slower to make a decision. And so if there's
the analytical person makes decisions on data, and they're less apt to be worried about how pretty your marketing plan is. What extra steps do you do in your marketing plan? They want to know, what is the right price? When is it going to sell? They're into data. The other person, on the other hand, and the analytical person is less emotional. So
right.
They don't make it on emotional reasons. They're making it pure on analytical data. And, they're like the investment guy who is making decisions on whether he's going to make a profit off of the purchase.
Right. So
the emotional person isn't doing it off of data. They're doing it. And oftentimes I think when you're dealing with more emotional people, you can ask the question, well, how would you feel if?
Right.
That always brings out how would you feel if you didn't sell it for as high as you want? How would you feel if it didn't sell in 30 days?
But if you use that language with the driver personality,
that would ruin it.
It's not going to really go very far.
It wouldn't go very far.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about this is a lot of times we come to a meeting in the same way, no matter who we're meeting with, right? So if you have any inkling as to what the personality style of the person you're meeting with, shift your words, shift your presentation and the materials that you bring so that you can meet them where they are and give them what they need in order to make a decision. Because if you do that, you feel like they feel like you're speaking their language. If you don't, there's a break in rapport and a break in that communication. And in that sense, it doesn't usually go well. So when you're negotiating with a driver personality, don't argue, right? Allow them to vent strong negative emotions. Recognize also that they want to be in control. Probe some of their flat assertions. If they are saying, well, I know the market's going to correct by 30%, so I'm just going to, whatever it is, tell me more about that. Just let them talk. Tell me more about
the
that.
driver never tells you everything that's going on in their head.
Right.
They're
but
going to
if you
leave it
can
out. If you
probe-
had a driver for a buyer contact, you have a hard time of determining exactly what they're looking for because they don't give up their cards about what's important.
Right, but if you are able to develop rapport with them, at some point they will start to let you in, right? But it does take that trust and establishing that trust, but they're going to be a little bit more standoffish. I agree with you there. But show them that you're listening, really kind of try to read between the lines, be factual, and be ready to give them more of those higher level details. But they're going to want to see that you are strong as well, right?
I was just dealing with a driver personality, an attorney, and you literally have to let them talk, but service is more important to the driver, what you provide as service, than the meek, mild person. They recognize the effort that you put into it in the service. So even as much as you don't have to sell as much to the driver, you don't have to talk as much to the driver, you certainly can't persuade a driver. The driver recognizes what you do to show properties that are matching what they're looking for.
Right. And so what's important about that is that you come across as that local market expert, that you know your stuff, that you come across, and present all of the details with clarity, and use language, to my last bullet point there. And I think kind of that's what you're saying, Jeff, is also use language that lets them know that they're still in full control, right? Here, here's what I'd like to do, whatever. So going to one other type of personality styles, the behavioral tendencies of the charming social people that are real people. They're personable. You can just tell by maybe even they tend to dress with brighter colors. They want to take you around the house and show you everything, and really want to connect with you on a personal level, right? Those people are going to you need to come and meet them where they are in a different way, because they make their buying decisions on how they feel about you. Do I like this person? Did they ask me about my family? Did they spend some time with some small talk and getting to know me? Because if they don't, I don't feel like I can trust them. I want to work with somebody that I really like. Very different than that driver personality we just talked about, right?
Very different.
So these people are more emotional. They can be gregarious, spontaneous, very social, expressive, charismatic. And so when you are meeting with that person, you want to work hard to establish rapport, spend a little bit of extra time doing that, act reassuring to them, avoid moving too fast, because that will break down some feelings of trust. Get to know them, ask questions about them, and get them talking. They're usually people that don't have a hard time talking. And make use of heavy use of probing pauses. So kind of that asking a question and then just being quiet and letting them talk. If they are a little bit submissive, don't exploit that in any way. or assume that they are going to make an instant decision, or that that you're talking over their head or anything like that. Guide them firmly but gently. And again, determine their emotional drivers. Okay, we talked about the analytical prospect. They're accurate, they're cautious, they're meticulous, conscientious, cool and aloof, perfectionist. So those are people that are like we talked about, the scientists, the a data analytical kind of person, could be an accountant, etc. Somebody who is usually analyzing numbers. Know your facts, know your data. You need to know that because they're going to see through it if you don't. Be very organized when you come to the meeting, because if you are naturally somebody who is maybe unorganized and like, I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants, that's not going to go over well with the analytical prospect. Okay. Don't try to razzle dazzle them. They're really going to hone in on the numbers. Don't rush them to make a decision. I think that's a really important factor. If you rush them to make a decision, most likely you will break trust and break rapport. They need time to make a decision, and they may not make it right then and there. But also give them time to process and make a decision. Okay, so slow it down. So you fast talkers out there, slow it down even more for this group, this prospect. Okay, so just as important as knowing which style the style you are and what obstacles can get in the way, if you're the opposite personality style. So really important to know your own style before you meet with them, and know what some of the things that you may do that may turn that person off, because they're not the same personality style. Okay, so in summary today, I want you guys to think a little bit deeper about who you're working with next time you meet with them. Think about yourself and your own personality style and how you show up to each appointment, and how you may need to modify how and what you say based on who you're talking to. Be prepared for your appointments. I can't, stress that enough. And present to them based on their emotional drivers, and shift your way of doing things based on your client's personality style. So I hope that was helpful today. We will send this out. So some of the tips for the price reduction and things that you should have in your arsenal, we can send your way. And I hope you guys take some time to really, when you're out there meeting people, kind of try to look at the personality styles and think next time about buyers and sellers and meeting them where they are. Okay. All
Good
right.
information. Thank you.
Thank you,
Karen.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here, guys.